Where does the line between our world and the unknown blur? Perhaps it's not in the far reaches of space, but in unexpectedly familiar places. Let's journey to the dense, quiet north woods of Wisconsin, to the small town of Eagle River. The year is 1961. The Cold War casts a shadow of anxiety. The space race is in full swing, and the once familiar skies now seem to hold strange new possibilities. It was against this backdrop, on a quiet April morning, that Joe Simonton, a local chicken farmer, had his routine shattered by an event seemingly ripped from science fiction. He didn't just witness an unidentified flying object land in his yard, he interacted with its occupants. The story that unfolds from there is a labyrinth of strangeness, one of the most bizarre and well-documented close encounters of the third kind, forcing us to question the very limits of reality. Brace yourselves, because the unexplained is about to knock on the door. It was nearly noon in Eagle River. Joe Simonton, a man in his 60s, was in his kitchen, enjoying the simplicity of a late lunch. The day unfolded like so many others in that isolated, peaceful region. It was as he turned to the sink that something outside broke the normalcy, a metallic glint descending vertically without a sound. The descent was smooth, controlled, almost mechanical, like a scenic elevator gliding down from the sky. The initial confusion was palpable. Was it the roof? Impossible. The roof was dark green, and this thing radiated its own light, silvery, almost blinding. Driven by a mix of curiosity and apprehension, Joe rushed outside. There it was, hovering inches above the ground before gently touching down on the gravel of his driveway, a disc-shaped object, perhaps about 30 feet in diameter and nearly 12 feet high. It was larger than anything he could have imagined landing there. The surface looked like brushed metal with no visible rivets or seams. A UFO right there in his yard. The silence of the surrounding forest seemed to amplify the surreal presence of the machine. Joe barely had time to absorb the object's scale when, on the upper section, a part of the hull opened upwards, like the hatch of a futuristic trunk, revealing a dark opening. And from it, a figure emerged, small, humanoid, about 5 feet tall. It wore a dark, apparently one-piece suit, tight-fitting, with a turtleneck collar. No visible zippers, buttons, or seams. The being held a metallic container, resembling a jug or canteen, and looked directly at Joe. Then it gestured, a clear universal motion, pointing to the jug, then to its mouth. Water. It needed water. Joe hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He approached cautiously. As he took the jug, his eyes met those of the small being, and that's when he felt something indescribable. The eyes were dark, large, and possessed an intensity penetrating. It was more than a look. It was a probing, almost hypnotic gaze that forced him to look away, feeling suddenly exposed. Was the communication telepathic or just intensely expressive? Joe couldn't say, but the message was clear. With the now strangely light jug in his hands, Joe turned and went inside, heading to the basement to get fresh water from the hand pump. His mind was a whirlwind. Who were they? Where did they come from? What did they want with water? Well, they asked for water, he thought, trying to stay calm. I'll take it to them and see what happens." With the jug full, he returned. The being was still waiting. Joe walked up to the craft, feeling the cold metal under his fingers as he lightly leaned on the hull to hand the container over with both hands. Again that fixed, studying gaze. The being took the jug, brought it inside the opening for a moment, and handed it back empty to Joe. Then it made that peculiar gesture, a salute with the back of its hand facing outwards. A silent thank you. Instinctively, perhaps from shock or the sheer strangeness of the moment, Joe mimicked the salute. It was then that he noticed another being inside the craft near the opening. Identical to the first, it was busy with an even more surreal task, cooking. The second being operated a sort of square grill, either floating or integrated into the ship, which emitted heat and a faint steam, but had no visible flames on it. Small discs that looked like pancakes were browning. Joe, perhaps trying to normalize the impossible or simply curious, pointed towards the food and made the universal gesture for eating. No sound came from the beings. The first one, who had received the water, looked at the cook, seemed to communicate something silently, and the cook then picked up 4 of those pancakes and offered them to Joe. He took them. They were hot, surprisingly heavy and coated in a thin layer of something oily, perhaps grease. The texture was odd. Later, alone, Joe couldn't resist. He took a bite. The taste was non-existent, unpleasant, like chewing cardboard. If this is their food, Joe thought, with a touch of morbid humor, no wonder they don't grow much. This mundane exchange, water for inedible food for us within the context of an extraterrestrial encounter, added an almost comical layer to the profound mystery. The interaction ended as abruptly as it began, the first being reached for the edge of the hatch. With a dry, audible click, it closed. And then the final technological marvel. The seam line of the door completely vanished. The surface of the disc became smooth again, seamless, perfect, without any hint that an opening had ever existed there. Immediately, the craft began to rise, silently and vertically, just as it had descended. It climbed about 20 feet, hovering for a second above the treetops. That's when the silence was broken. A powerful sound, a deafening whoosh, like a gigantic release of compressed air or some unknown turbine kicking in. In that instant, the craft shot off, heading south at a sharp 45-degree angle, ascending and accelerating at an unimaginable speed. Joe Simonton fixed his eyes on the disappearing point. 3 seconds, maybe less. That's how long it took for the object to vanish from sight, leaving behind only the blue sky and a ringing in his ears. Joe stood there, frozen in his driveway, in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. The smell of ionized air lingering, perhaps. In his hands, the only physical trace of the visit. 4 hot, greasy pancakes from another world. His mind struggling to grasp the reality of what he had just witnessed. The beings, he would later describe them as short, dark-complexioned, maybe looking Italian, dressed it in those strange functional suits. No marks on the ground, no evidence, except for the pancakes and his vivid memory. Joe contacted the authorities. The case reached the Air Force and Project Blue Book, the official UFO investigation. They took the pancakes for analysis. The verdict? They were made of common terrestrial ingredients: buckwheat, fat. Real food, though perhaps poorly made or prepared unusually. The official Blue Book explanation classified the case as unexplained. Joe Simonton faced ridicule, but he also found believers. His story was consistent, its details too peculiar to be easily fabricated. For him, the pancake analysis or public opinion mattered little. He was there. He saw it. He interacted. And that, for him, was the only truth that counted. His once quiet life was forever marked by those few minutes of impossible contact. Joe Simonton's encounter in Eagle River remains a landmark case in ufology, not for its grandeur, but for its profound strangeness and almost mundane details. Water for pancakes, beings resembling Italians cooking in a spaceship. The analysis confirming the terrestrial nature of the food only adds more questions. Was it a test, a bizarre form of interaction, or something our understanding cannot yet grasp? Joe's story, with its disconcerting simplicity and peculiar physical evidence, resists easy explanations and continues to fascinate us, challenging our notions about extraterrestrial visitation. What's your interpretation of this incredible and unique case? What do you think really happened that day in Wisconsin? The exchange of items, the appearance of the beings, the pancakes. Share your theories and thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this enigma. And of course, if you're fascinated by these mysteries that surround our universe and want us to keep bringing more cases like this, please leave a like. It's a small click for you, but a huge boost to help YouTube share these stories with more people who, like us, look up at the stars with curiosity and wonder. Your support is crucial.